Edlin, also known as Terror 161. This is a picture of me, believe it or not, as a little angelic, cherubic kid growing up in the Bronx and really not wanting to be this guy. I went to a private school, which took me through Harlem and the South Bronx. And this was about 1969. The graffiti on the wall back then was political only. It was like kill Whitey, off the pigs, stop the war in Vietnam, a lot of buy black. There was revolution in the air. The hippie movement, Martin Luther King had just been shot. And a little kid like me had a sense that there was something wrong, but really didn't have a revolution to sign up for. So, about a year or two later, I started noticing the writing on the wall change. And now all of a sudden there were names, Joe 182, Taki 183. Even though people mentioned that it started in Philadelphia, which is true, in like 67, 68, nobody in New York had any clue what was going on in Philadelphia, and it didn't impact what we did at all. So they definitely were first, but they did not influence us, except one guy, Top Cat 126, came back from Philadelphia with a very unique handwriting. And it impacted the way everybody wrote, at least on my line. So this was the first markers that we ever used, El Marco. Dry Mark was another one. This probably came out in like 1972. It's a relic, like myself. This was the first name that I ever wrote, Tarantula 235, with a little crude spider, which my kids now tell me is actually a crab because spiders have 8 legs and this has 6. Nice. Okay, so when graffiti started, handwriting was all we had. There were no pieces, there were no characters or anything else. So in order to stand out, you really had to have a good handwriting, and I did develop one. That's something I drew not too long ago. Whatever I do is like dating back to the 70s. And that's what I want to talk about. The 70s are highly undocumented and unknown, especially in Europe, where subway art and style wars and all of that stuff kind of like exploded onto the scene over here and gave you like a finished product, but it evolved into that. It didn't start out that way. That's at Yankee Stadium not that long ago. I still do this. That's a recent drawing I did. The Afro character was smoking a joint. It was like the first character I ever saw, so I'm very close. It's like, okay, so you get the recipe through Subway Art, Style Wars, Beat Street, whatever. But there was like 12 years missing, so it's kind of like when Columbus came over to America and said, I discovered it, but the Indians were already there. These guys are, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles. There was like Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, the original black bluesmen that they reformatted the music and made it accessible to the masses. These are the important roots guys of the movement that happened. That's my handwriting, says J.SON. This is Terror 161, Comet, which was actually done. Comet had gone to jail and Scene had perfected doing his name perfectly, so to keep his name alive, he did it on the train. That's me in Barcelona doing a terror illegally, which is the only way I really like to do graffiti, because I believe that, the spirit and rebellion factor of it and the adrenaline is a crucial ingredient. This is what graffiti really started out as and looks like. Some of these names, this right, you can see like Stay High 149 with the little character from your British TV show, The Saint with Roger Moore. except he made his smoking a joint. Just the initial Lee 163rd with the interlocking E's. This was the beginning of style and handwriting, 1972. This is the Philadelphia style, a fellow named T-Rex 131 who died of an overdose in the early 70s. He was a member of UGA, which was the first graffiti collaborative formed by Hugo Martinez, a college student at the time, and he rounded up all the greatest of the current crop of graffiti writers and put them together to sell canvases in like 1974, 75. That's a piece that he did. This is from my collection. It's probably the earliest black book that I know of. I purchased it from Snake One, who was one of the first writers ever. Cat 87, same book. Just the handwriting. These guys were everywhere when there were no pieces. Stay High 149, everybody in graffiti calls themselves a legend or a pioneer. This guy is a folk hero. He died a couple of years ago. He was a heroin addict for a long time. He made it to 61. The most famous tag ever in graffiti and inspiration to thousands. I mean, you can't say enough about him. So after he had like Stay High 149 plastered on every single train, every division, he got too popular and he changed his name to this, Voice of the Ghetto, which most people have a shorter name when they change their name. This guy made it longer. And this is an actual piece of the subway train that I liberated in 1980. The fire extinguisher would be behind this door. We used to go on, over Voice of the Ghetto would be like a cigarette ad or hemorrhoid cream, whatever, pick your product. We would go in the 80s hunting for old tags from the 70s, like ripping the ads down on the last stop of the train. You know, most of the time we would come up empty-handed, but occasionally we would strike gold. So it was like an archaeological dig in a way. And then we would just ride the train to the last stop and kick the shit out of this door until it broke off the hinges and carry it out like we owned it. And, you know, luckily I have the foresight to save this. It's hanging in my wall right now. Okay, so now this guy right here is extremely important. He is the ultimate graffiti photographer of the 70s. It's rare that someone else took this picture of him, but he's standing here, probably 1974, with the Stay High 149, more advanced form of that, with the character smoking the joint. And there were two Flints. This guy wrote Flint, ... and he always had a saying and 3 dots after his name. He would write like Flint, bad but not evil. Flint, for ladies only, you know. Always a saying. This guy, LSD, which you think would be a 3, but it's actually Om, Sanskrit symbol. So LSD Om was his partner. And right here is another tag above where it says the real Flint dig. That's a dig at the other Flint, 707, who is got a tag above him, and he's saying, I'm the real Flint, you know. So they both were really important. Okay, so LSD Om, this guy was a hippie white boy who grew up on the Upper West Side. His father died, they didn't have as much money, so he moves into mainly all-black neighborhood, 149th Street in the Grand Concourse. He was already writing graffiti, but this was where Stay High and Deadleg 167, who drew another character with a cane, you know, Deadleg. And he staked them out until he found them and started partnering with them. And he was writing with everybody, and this is what his tag looked like when there was pretty much only a tag to distinguish you. This is him, and that's an old police car from like 1974. All of these photos were taken by that guy Flint, Gennari, who Flint ... Here he is on a police car. I mean, this is like 1973, 74. I mean, he looks like he could have been in the Rolling Stones, but he was like a major graffiti artist. Not exactly what you would think. Okay, this guy, this is Art and Design High School, 1975. This guy, Bomb One, whose name is Al Diaz, wrote Samo. along with Jean-Michel Basquiat later on, and took the Flint ... because every Samo had 3 dots and a saying. So Flint is vitally important because this guy Al Diaz was the one who suggested to Jean-Michel Basquiat, hey, let's write graffiti, and that led him into a career in art. The black man in the picture on the left just passed away like a year ago. He wrote Shadow, and his brother is Spike Lee. He was 1 year younger than Spike is. That's Bomb 1. You can see the elaborate handwriting. Handwriting, I think, has regressed. People now are amazing artists. You know, there's street art, but nobody really concentrates on the elaborate handwriting that I would argue when this gentleman showed pictures of a door with a lot of tags on it, they were ugly. I would agree with that. But when we first started, the style of your handwriting was everything, and if I saw like tags like this on that door, I would be like, well, that's a work of art. And this is Bomb 1, Al Diaz again. This is from a book called Don 1, King of Queens, that just came out. It's about an obscure 70s writer from the Double R line, which very few people even looked at. But a kid much later brought him back, you know. This is SJK 171 and an unknown guy smoking a joint in the bathroom of Art and Design High School. Art and Design High School produced more graffiti writers than any other high school in New York. You would find that understandable because it was an art school. This is what the trains looked like when they first started getting hit. Probably 1972, 73. This guy, Chris 170, maybe lasted a couple of years. He was influential because he started Riff 170, who was one of the greatest style masters of all time. He introduced him to graffiti, but him and his brother Bonanza, they died out pretty early. A lot of guys just wrote for like 2 or 3 years and never made it to the piecing era. Taboo 1, The Red Train, which you probably saw if you know that book, Face of Graffiti, which is a great book to get. It was the first big book on the subject. That's a Staff 161, who Blade in his new book credits with putting scenery on the train and inspiring him to do all those whole cars. This is from my collection, Turk 62. This is what, you know, I feel like these pieces were bubbly and had soul, and that everything, like all these portraits and murals that you see now, wouldn't have occurred if we hadn't have done this stuff first, even though there's really no visual connection to the content of it. Just the idea of pirating public space and putting it on a global stage enabled these guys to take it to the next level or a different level, different medium. This is by Riff 170, one of the greatest style masters ever. He had like 26 different names because he got bored. He felt limited by just 4 letters, so he just changed his name like on a weekly basis. And this week he happened to be Fear 3. That's one of his whole cars, which was groundbreaking at the time, 1973. Says Riff. Phase 2 was his mentor. Probably the greatest style master ever. Invented like the writer's bench, the term no comp, you know, did the original hip hop flyers before pretty much anybody even thought about doing it. Total crossover guy, still around. Tracy 168 on top, probably my hero, greatest writer of all time, got up, all city, did characters. Maybe you guys know the Tracy face. It's like a long-haired guy with like big aviator glasses. Oz 109 underneath him with a little catfish cartoon character, 1975. Blade just came out with a book. Nobody did more on trains than this guy did. 5,000 pieces, that's a conservative estimate. Him and his partner Comet, black guy and a white guy, greatest tandem ever. And I think the collaboration between races to go against the system was like the greatest thing that I've ever experienced, and really powerful. Sunny 107, these are all from a museum show that was just going on at the Museum of the City of New York. A guy named Martin Wong, who passed away in '99, collected all of these black books. So you know, black books were what we all signed each other's name in and collected. But most people have a story like, hey man, my mom threw away my black book in like 1982, when we were moving. So very few of these from the 70s especially even exist anymore. And this is, the kind of stuff that I collect. Billy 167 was probably the greatest white style master ever. He died of a beating in a drug location in the late 80s. And he wound up working for the transit towards the end of his life in the same yard where I used to do pieces, and he would be like, okay, the coast is clear, Jay, you could hit there tonight, or Jay, the detectives were looking for you, don't come here tonight, I'd just go somewhere else. That's another piece by Billy. Ale 1, another monster on transit. What I liked about his style was it was perfectly clean. He didn't use a lot of different colors, but they were solidly filled in, and he was kind of a perfectionist. This is the Houston Street Wall, which is the most famous art wall in New York City. It's very prominent on Houston and Bowery. And Martha Cooper, who's a dear friend of mine, turned 70 on this day, and we told her that we were going to film the wall getting painted over, and when she showed up, it was just a giant birthday card for her. So that was a great moment. This was my terror inside the M. This guy Part has been doing this since the 70s, and I just wanted to emphasize what style is. This guy's a style master who's a prominent member of the Death Squad, which is probably the best style crew ever assembled. Part, Chain 3, Panic, a lot of the greats. But this guy's unusual because he's been doing it since like 74, 75, and his stuff is still state of the art. And when you do a piece with letters and you don't have any colors or designs, that's the true test of style. You can just see the whole skeleton of the piece, and it's beautiful. Okay, these guys, the guy on the left, my left, is Sin. He's got one eyebrow, in case you're wondering who he is. The guy in the middle is Duster, and the guy on the right is Scene. This is a long time ago. Scene was doing airbrush t-shirts, which you can see in the background, he was always hustling, always had money in his pocket. This, in my opinion, is the greatest graffiti canvas in existence. It's it's called the Snake One Collective. It was produced by all the prominent members of UGA circa 1974, and I was involved with a collector. I put together a project. The guy's name, he's since died, Gunther Sachs. He's a billionaire German industrialist who was once married to Brigitte Bardot, and he decided to collect graffiti art, and he took me on as an advisor, and I told him this is the Holy Grail, and he paid $100,000 for it. So it's somewhere in Germany with an expensive car. That's a close-up to Phase 2. You can see Phase 2 was just miles ahead style-wise of his contemporaries. That's me doing a drawing. That's a photo, 1974, of an A-train piece who was a big train rider taken. I love the way this is taken. It's a very famous photographer named Danny Lyon, who's done books, but he wasn't really focusing on graffiti. He just happened to take this shot, which is one of the greatest graffiti photos, I think, in history. And this is where I evolved to in the 80s. This was from the Source magazine. That's me on the left, J.SON. Richie is Scene. Scene J.SON, and a Richie J.SON on the bottom. The top one is a Dean piece, who was a guy who got brave with about 20 of his friends and beat up one of my friends. So that's a picture that Henry Chalfant took in 1976 of me writing over his name. And eventually he was shot to death by his neighbor. Not happy about that, but that's what happened. This is a panel that I just led at the Museum of the City of New York. So to my immediate right is John Narr, who is a British citizen living in New York for many years, who did the book. He was the photographer of Faith of Graffiti, which came out in about 1974 and really documents the dawn of the 70s. Really, piecing hadn't really evolved at all yet. Martha Cooper, who most of you know, is in the center, and Henry Chalfant is on the end. And this is my book, and Martha Cooper took the photo, and it's the Houston Street wall with a complete Shepard Fairey piece on it. And what I liked about it was that this guy, Attic, who has pieces in a very outlaw style all over New York, no permission, just decided to go over it. And so it's a reminder that, yeah, street art exists and it's popular, but that, the real graffiti, which is illegal and not always comfortable with the street art contingent, is going to let you know that in the street there are no rules. So, it's funny because when I did this book, I made it half street art and half graffiti because I had seen the handwriting on the wall, not to be too cliche, and realized that it's a different world out there, and if I wanted to reach a larger audience, I needed to be current with what's happening now. So Martha Cooper took me to Art Basel, which is a big street art and graffiti kind of gathering where people just go wild in the streets and everybody has a permission wall. And the other girl that came with us is this street artist named Aiko, Lady Aiko, from Japan, and she asked me to be on a wall with her, so we did a collaboration. About 3 years after it was completed, I don't know if this is a verb, but I got Banksy'd. Basically, somebody phoned me up and said, your gate is in a gallery now and it's selling for $60,000. And I'm like, no way. So sure enough, the same gallery that steals all of Banksy's stuff off the streets and sells it for hundreds of thousands had taken this gate, and thankfully they were not successful in selling it because I don't do stuff for sale, and I consider that thievery. When somebody takes your stuff which was never meant for commercial profit and does that. But in closing, I just want to let you guys know that you kind of came to the party late in terms of discovering graffiti, and that before '84 and all the stuff that as the beginning, there was the '70s and a long evolution that guys like me and guys before me who don't even like the term graffiti, they call it writing and refer to graffiti artists as writers only. And you get a lot of people from that era upset when you start to use, as they put it, the G word, kind of made to sound like the N word as a denigrating term. So, I kind of taken upon myself to be the messenger that there is an important history that is largely unknown, especially in Europe, and that the people that did it are still alive. What really got me off my ass was all these people like Stay High, Case 2, Peanut 2, they're in their 50s, they did drugs or whatever, and they're dying off now. They're only in their 50s or early 60s. Once they're gone, somebody else that started in 1987 is going to tell their story for them and get it wrong. So I would encourage anybody here that's doing a festival or whatever to bring these guys over while they're still breathing and let them tell their stories because they're powerful and they're the truth. That's it.